Welcome, everyone. We're really excited today. We have a very exciting guest that we're really looking forward to sharing and to talk with a little bit more. My name is Christian Battistelli. I am a senior wealth advisor with Unified Advisory Group at Asante Financial Management. I'm joined here with my partner, senior financial advisor, Stephen Jones. And we're really looking forward to debuting this guest. And Stephen, why don't you tell everyone a little bit more about the guest we have today?
Thank you, Christian. Welcome, Carl. It's an honor to have you join us today. I was first introduced to Carl by C.I. Asante when he was the sketch guy for the New York Times. Using a plain white card and a Sharpie, Carl's sketches made money concepts clear and relatable. I was also fascinated by Carl's speech to an Asante conference in 2012 in Dallas, Texas. A certified financial planner and best-selling author of The Behavior Gap and the One-Page Financial Plan, Carl's work has inspired audiences worldwide. He also has a soon-to-be-released book entitled Your Money, Imagining Wealth in 101 Simple Sketches. On a personal note, I consider Carl to be a true mentor, transforming how I thought and communicated. As a CPA/CA, I thought all financial questions had an answer, and my role was to show you the way with my solution. Instead, Carl emphasized having a conversation first. He introduced core concepts to me such as we're nice, we tell the truth, we put clients first, we diagnose before we prescribe, we ask really good questions, we listen, we simplify, we are guides, and we turn dreams into reality. He taught me how to be a real financial advisor by building real relationships, focusing on work that matters, and building a business that fits my life, not the other way around. Lastly, Carl cares. After missing 2 sessions this year of Carl's workshop, I received a video from Carl asking if things were okay. It's true. He really does care for a Canadian hockey fan.
Well, thanks, Stephen. I'm super glad to be here. And Christian, thank you.
Awesome. Well, we'll jump right in and we're going to review some of Carl's sketches that Steve and I have picked together and some of the ones that have really stood out to us and I think really echo a lot of not only Carl's work, but also how we like to deal with clients and the process we like to go through. So I'll go ahead and jump right into it.
Mm.
So this first sketch is one of my personal favorites because I think it really encapsulates the foundation of everything we do when it comes to planning. Planning is not just about spreadsheets. It's first and foremost about finding out why we make decisions because your why will influence your choices more than any spreadsheet ever will. It's the first step in any planning relationship, in any planning process is to figure out what are we solving for? Why do we do things the way we do? And Carl, why don't you tell us a little bit more about this sketch and why it's so important to you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just sort of looking at it, I was like, what are all the lines around it? So I would imagine maybe some people would just hear this. It's the word why written with a line coming in from the left, and then it goes around why in a circle. And there's probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe 7 or 8 rotations, circles, and then it exits out to the right. And I remember thinking about this. It was like, there was a slight sense, I want to use a slight sense of frustration. It's not exactly the right word, but a slight sense of like kind of really strong desire, angst, like really strong desire to get to the bottom of something. Right. And sometimes when we start asking ourselves why, there's a lot going on in our brains when we start wanting to explore the reason why we're doing things. And part of what goes on in your brain is saying, don't do that. It's going to be resource intensive. Like thinking, just make it black and white. Like just yes or no. Do I agree or disagree? We see this in all sorts of, the world today. It's so much easier to just quickly make a judgment about whether you agree or disagree with something than it is to try to understand and have an actual conversation. And there's reasons for that. Like, so what I was trying to get at with this sketch is that it's worth the energy. It's worth the time to sort of continually ask and remind yourself, why are you making the decisions you're making with money? Why is your money invested the way it is? Why are you spending the way you do, or why are you saving the way you do, or in retirement, why aren't you spending more? Like, and to not be frustrated with those questions, but to maybe just let them settle on us, gently, like on a long walk or on a road trip or as a journal exercise in the morning. Because the reason this matters is because how you invest your money or how you spend your money, how you use your money only matters to the degree that it's aligned with what's important to you,
Mm.
right? And getting clear about what's important to you is actually quite hard. Instagram's made it really hard because now everybody else tells us what's important to them, and we think that must, like I didn't know that I was supposed to want a chateau in France. Instagram has taught me that I'm supposed to want, a cabin in Canada somewhere. So I just compared chateau in France with cabin in Canada, just to be clear. Like in my mind, the cabin in Canada is probably more valuable. So anyway, I think that's why it's important to have these discussions. Otherwise, we could end up living other people's lives,
Mm.
trying to accomplish other people's goals, investing in things that we don't even care about or need. So that's why I think this one's really important. I love that you started with it.
Mhm. And I think and one of my favorite follow-up questions that I've heard you talk about so much that relates directly to this question, whenever you've in your career and your experience, whenever you've talked to a variety of very successful people and they bring up very good points and ask very good questions or bring up certain reasons why they're doing things, and you always sit back and you say, "Oh, that's really interesting. Tell me why is that important to you?" Or why is money important to you? And that follow-up question, I think just dig so much deeper beyond the you want to retire at 65 and spend $80,000 a year. And being able to sit back and any goal that a client has brought up and sit back and go, oh, that's interesting. Tell me why that's important to you. Again, it just digs so much deeper and creates this a very real relationship, as Stephen alluded to earlier.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, so I'll pass to one of Stephen's personal favorites, this with this next sketch here.
This is my all-time favorite, but like any great piece of art, I think I interpret it differently than you. So, Carl, I'll start with you first. When you came up with this sketch, what message were you trying to convey? And then I'll tell you my interpretation of it.
Yeah. Um, it's funny because I know exactly where I was. I was in a classroom at a university not far from us that I lecture at, and I had written the column, the New York Times column, but I didn't have a sketch for it yet. And I was speaking on when I was lecturing on Wednesday, and the my deadline was Thursday. So I was like, you know what? There's a bunch of really smart students. It was the MBA program. Maybe I should just ask them. And so the column was about the very real, and I hadn't framed it this way then. That was probably like 10 years ago. But now I'm really clear that when I feel nervous or worried about anything, but particularly about the markets or the economy or my job, I go clean the garage. And like that is actually the thing I do, but it's also a metaphor, right? Like I can organize my office. I can go take care of some things in the yard that have need like if I can get from this place where I feel totally out of control or nervous or worried or in extreme uncertainty, I can get to some place where I have some ability to organize, create order, have control, even in some small little part of my life. I've noticed I feel better. And when I feel better, that my ability to handle the next thing that feels a little out of control grows. So I can say, okay, what about that? Okay, what about that? And so that really was what the essay was about. And but what I've heard, and what this one also means to me, I also love this is also one of my, yeah, it's so hard. I say this about all of them, but it is one of my all-time favorites because it's the only one with no words. I believe it's the only one with no words. And I'm always trying to pull, like, I don't believe I believe perfection's achieved when there's nothing left to add. Not when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. And in this case, I was able to take away any words, which was really made me happy. So tell me what do you take from it, Stephen?
Well, this is interesting, and I think you're a visionary, and you thought of our current world 40 years later. So when
Yeah.
I look at this, obviously as an accountant, I love putting things in order as well. But I look at this and say, well, in today's world, managing wealth is hard. You know, in the old days, we used to get by, and I'm talking a long time ago, and not every advisor does this. We got by with a birthday card and a once a year call. And
Mm.
we were good at selling insurance or investment products, etc. But today's world is completely different for the clients we help. Our clients look for a solution that integrates all of those various components, whether it's investments, tax, etc., to address their big concerns. You know, how do I preserve my wealth? How do I mitigate taxes and costs? How do I take care of my spouse, children, favorite charities now and in the future? And that's no longer a one person show. We have to go out, we have our own team of professionals in the private client world, but we also work with developing relationships with the client's existing professionals. And to me, my favorite and best story was having the accountant in the room, having the lawyer in the room, going through an estate plan for a client and getting them to talk to each other. To In 1 hour, we went through a couple of combinations, came back the next day, presented to the client. And at the end, I said to the client and to the professionals, well, how many times have you had everyone in the room? I know there's a charge for the others, but we got so much done in 1 hour face to face versus emails, etc. And the response was, well, I've never done this before. Well, why
Right.
wouldn't
Right.
you? Why wouldn't you? Because, the final story in my mind is investments and taxes go hand in hand, which goes hand in hand with your goals and dreams. How can you
Mm.
not do it all together and have one firm coordinate that activity and make sure we're all addressing that why the Christian so nicely went through for us? So I absolutely love this, and I show this to everyone in our first meeting. We're here, but I'm
Yeah.
trying to take you there, and here's how our business actually works.
Yeah, I love
So
that.
absolutely love it. And you're just 40 years ahead of your time.
Yeah. Thank you. I mean, this was originally called portfolio design, as I remember. So it was like very specific about each individual piece of the portfolio, the investment process, but it also could be called financial planning. It also could be like living a life worth meaning. So I love that. Just the idea. And it's crazy to me. And I realized why we did it because I was around 27 years ago in this business too. You know, it, it's it was Nobel Prize winning research to think holistically. For a long time, you were thinking about just the merits of one individual piece of the puzzle, but to think about how it not only its individual merits, but how it complemented and interacted with the whole was actually Nobel Prize winning research around modern portfolio theory. And the same is true with financial planning. Like, how could you possibly make investment decisions or spending decisions or giving decisions without understanding the tax implications or the investment implications or the and
Mhm.
the client's goals. So yeah, I think it's super important.
And you'll notice as we move into this next sketch that we've created a bit of a story in terms of the order of these put in. We've started with why being the most pivotal, most foundational part of the planning process as a whole. And then we've moved to the sketch titled The Power of Order and putting things in order. And so we understand our why, we understand where we're going. We've put our current house in order. We understand where we are today and what our situation looks like today. And the next sketch where we look at, and again, another one of my favorites is really what comes next. So we understand where we go, where we're going. We understand where we are today. And then our role is really to help clients focus on what matters most. So it's the things that matter to them. Again, going back to that bigger why, what actually matters to you? does it matter to you if you're not invested in the next latest and greatest tech company to come on? Or does it matter to you if you're in Bitcoin or any other, you name it, hot investment? Does that really matter to you? Or is it really something else? And then looking at what we can control, what matters most to us, and then helping our clients focus on, what falls in the middle of that diagram there. So Carl, tell us a little bit about this sketch.
Yeah, this was, I mean, if the story behind this actually was uh years and years ago, I had a close family member ask me about, they were really worried about something. And I asked them what was wrong. And after a little bit of like, oh, nothing, but I finally got down to it. And for your audience, I mean, in the United States, we unfortunately have not spent much time talking or worrying about currency. We sort of just do, and again, I'm stating this as an unfortunate truth. Like we sort of just do what we want and then let the rest of the world deal with it, unfortunately.
Mhm.
Currency is not, I've lived in New Zealand, I've lived in London, I've spent lots of times. I know in other places sometimes we talk about currency and the impact of currency. Well, it's not a question I'd ever been asked, but my family member was like, "Oh, the dollar." I'd never heard anybody say that. I mean, I was at a big brokerage firm at the time. It had never come up. And I remember saying, like, "What do you mean the dollar? What do you?" And she said, "Oh, it could collapse." And this led to this long conversation about, we were at a lacrosse game watching another family member play lacrosse. And instead, we were sort of spinning around this idea of a currency problem. Well, this was actually my mom. My mom has no control.
Mhm.
You can definitely argue that if the dollar collapsed, it would matter, right? But she has no control over it. And she wasn't going to control it that day when it definitely didn't matter that day when she was supposed to be watching a lacrosse game or the
Mhm.
next day when she was going to be at church. Instead, she was worried about the dollar. The next day when she was going to be on a walk with her friends and instead she was worried about the dollar.
Mhm.
So that was where this came from, was like, between that and the Serenity Prayer were the two kind of like inspirations for this sketch. And the good thing about finance is if you made a list of the top 10 things that actually affect your lifetime achievement of your financial goals, if you made a list of the things, most of them, in fact, all of them but one in my mind, you have control over, right?
Mhm.
Like how much do I save? When do I save? My behavior, my asset allocation, when I spend, how much I spend. And there's probably two that you don't have control over. The end of analysis,
Mhm.
the day that you might pass away,
Mhm.
and the market. The market is going to matter. It's going to matter. It's going to be one of the things
Mhm.
that matters, but you have no control over it. And I'm just suggesting, like, maybe we just put it in its proper place instead of having it be the thing we talk about all the time. What if we talked about the 8 or 9 things that do actually matter that we have control over and left 10% of the time to talk about the impact of the market? That's all I'm saying.
Mhm.
It leads to better financial outcomes, but more importantly, behaving that way leads to happiness. Like we're happier, we're less worried, we're less anxious. And so when you find yourself getting anxious, I have lots of people. This is the only sketch that my wife lets me hang on the wall. Like the rest of them have to live in the garage. So because it helps her remember too.
Mhm.
Like if I'm worried, does it matter? Do I have control over it? If not,
Mhm.
take a walk.
Mhm. I love that. I love that. I love the analogy how, historically, maybe 90% of the time was spent talking about something we can't control, which is the markets,
Yeah, let's
and
just
really
flip it.
flipping
That's
that on
all.
its head and saying, let's spend 10% of our time talking about it because, like you said, it matters. But really, let's spend 90% talking about those key things you listed, how much we save, how much we're spending, when we're spending it, and those really important decisions that not only matter, but are within our control. And I think it does really lay it out perfectly. Is if I focus on the things that I can control and do and act in a way that aligns with those bigger goals that I'm planning for, chances are you're going to be okay because the other things that are outside of your control, those things usually take care of themselves over the long run.
That's right.
Mhm.
That's right.
So then we started with why, we put our house in order, We're focusing on things that matter and that we can control. And the next piece of the process that we always like to go through is really highlighted by this sketch. And it's an acknowledgement that planning is a process and not a one-time event, because the only thing that we can really guarantee in planning is that plans change. And the path from where we are today and where we want to go is not always a straight line. And so, Carl, tell me a little bit about the background on this sketch and why you drew this the way you do and kind of your feelings on this one.
Yeah, so what we want as humans, and I want this too, so I have deep empathy for it, is we really want, imagine another line on the sketch. We really want a straight line between where we are today and where we want to go. So
Mm,
between current reality and goal, we want a straight line. And often as financial planners, that's what we provide in the form of a plan. Like it's a 30-year line or a 15-year line or a
mm,
45-year line. And it's really important that you work with a financial planner that cares deeply about making that line the best line they possibly can,
mm,
right? Like they've thought really carefully about all the assumptions that go into it. It's like they are the best line drawers in the whole world. They have the biggest calculators, the biggest spreadsheet, all that. And that financial planner should acknowledge that they know it's wrong, right? Like that it's just a model of reality, and all models, all models are wrong, some are useful. So let's make this a useful model. And so then what we start to understand is like reality is going to show up differently than the line we
mm,
draw. And so financial planning really becomes not about being precisely correct today. It becomes about being a little less wrong tomorrow. And so if we understand that's a never-ending process of course correction,
mm,
that wrongness showing up doesn't mean we did something wrong. It means we live in reality.
mm,
And instead of running from it and maybe be getting defensive about it, like that's one sign that I'd be a little careful is like if you feel like somebody's defending an outdated map,
mm,
right? Like, and it's okay. Being wrong is not, in this case, being wrong is just reality, right? And so I think if we start to realize like the goal is to be actively looking for, this is my actively looking, I put like binoculars up to my eyes, actively looking for what we call disconfirming evidence,
mm,
like actively looking for the ways in which wrongness shows up. Oh, you didn't get that inheritance you were sure you were going to get. Like
mm,
that's an example. Oh, the market is better than we thought it was going to be. The market is worse than you
mm,
didn't get the raise. Tariffs. Like there's all like sorry to bring something up that we don't want to talk about, but yeah, like there's all sorts of ways in which information that we didn't have at the time is going to show up. Instead of running from it or hiding from it, we're going to actively look for it. And then we're going to
mm,
go to you and go, hey, it's okay. Don't worry. Like we draw that line, but we know how to deal with things when they show up a little differently.
mm,
Like we got all these, just because the last 11 mountain passes we've been over, there's been a lake,
mm,
doesn't mean there will be over the 12th. And if we
mm,
get there, we've got a backpack full of tools.
mm,
Our skill is not making sure there's a lake. Our
mm,
skill is knowing how to navigate when there isn't.
mm,
So that's kind of how I think about this.
I do have to share one story. I typically do this with new clients. I start with a blank piece of paper, far left, lower left. I said, here's where your investments are today. Top right, I'll put a dot. Here's where they will be in the future. Can you draw a line that connects today to the upper right? And no one, 100 people I've talked to, no one has drawn a line starting with the line going down.
Right.
They all have it going up. I remember many years ago, my dad became a client after I started my business. And another accountant, a man of few words, after a rough investment cycle, markets were down, he calls me up and he says, Stephen, do these things ever go up? And he hangs up on me, just hangs up on me.
That's funny.
So a year and a half later, I called him back. I said, yes, they do. And I hung up on him.
That's really funny.
Right? But he was not used to that downturns starting up front, and he did very well over the long term. But it was a classic story that my mom and I would just talk about for many years after that.
Mm.
Yeah,
But
that's really
nobody goes down in their graph in their mind. It's always up first.
Mm.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
And I love the analogy, Carl, you use with the idea of an outdated map. And you've talked in the past about how, what we do is like navigating a landscape where the map is constantly changing and we're not really sure where the destination is. So I love the idea of the constant adjustments and iterating as we go. And it's a constant journey of being a little less wrong. Because oftentimes the journey itself isn't clear, but the next step usually is. What is the
That's
next
true.
step we can take towards that destination? Well, now the destination has changed, or the landscape has changed. There was a lake there, there's not a lake there anymore. And figuring out, okay, where do we step next? And I think that really encapsulates this here. Now,
Yeah.
again, following the process that we've gone, when we started with why, we put our house in order, we focus on the things that matter and that we can control. We've acknowledged that the landscape changed, the journey is not clear, but the next best step often is. We then have to think a little bit more about risk. And Stephen, why don't you take us a little bit about why you love this sketch and how it talks about risk?
It's anyone who's been in the business for a while will know what I'm talking about. I thought of everything except for this. To
Mm.
me, that's risk. And if you've been in the
Mhm.
business long enough, what is our greatest asset? It's our health and our ability to earn a living. But far too often, the unexpected happens. And we all know people, situations where you have a family with a premature death, or an
Mm.
unexpected illness, a disability of a spouse, or a child's mental health challenge. That's, in the back of our minds, we know there are possibilities, but we never think about it or plan for it. As professionals, I've gone through so many situations where the totally unexpected happens. Well, we do our best to plan. We have insurance, life insurance, disability, critical illness for the common um, troubles when health diminishes. I mean, mental health these days is a challenge for us all. So we can help plan for the unexpected, but more importantly, very much like the previous sketches, you know, we we're experienced. I've been through this before. I can help you meet that challenge. Perhaps I can give you some peace of mind. We'll come out, it's not fair that we're here today, but we'll find a way. We'll find a different path. We will have
Mhm.
something to help you. So that was my take on it. It's just a good opportunity, more importantly, to say we're there to help support our clients when the unexpected happens. Now, when you were sketching this, Carl, what were you thinking?
Yeah, it's I was trying to come up with an image to capture one of my favorite sayings about risk, which is risk is what's left over after you think you've thought of everything.
Mm,
And in the industry, for anybody listening, like we actually have a slightly different term for that. What I'm actually pointing to is uncertainty,
Mhm.
but in that's the technical definition, but the way we normal humans talk, we're actually pointing at risk, which is fine.
Mhm.
Clients don't think risk is some cute little knob called standard deviation that I can dial up or dial down. They think risk is, am I going to end up living under a bridge? Like,
Mhm.
so I was actually just trying to visualize this idea that risk is what's left over after you think, it's not the car that you see that's going to hit you. It's the car that you never saw,
Mhm.
right? And there's all sorts of examples of that the last 2 years, some in the last 2 weeks. And so I thought of everything as in this really clean, crisp box, right? And that was the idea of like, I can put a box around it. I understand. Like I thought of everything. And except for this is in this floaty, I don't know what we'd call it exactly, like probably closer to a cloud.
Mhm.
It's got loose boundaries. I'm not sure where the edges are. And so that's what I was trying to visualize here. And because we can't think of it, that can feel a little scary, but it really actually what it points to is the idea of just being more generally resilient, right? Rather than event specific resilience, which is really important, but that's in the I thought of everything box. We have specific types of insurance that might help with that. Like there's the except for the risk box, except for this, the cloud there is really solved by being generally resilient. So not event specific resilience because we don't know the event. Like an emergency fund is general resilience.
Mm.
Having margin in our income in terms of like spending less than we make, that's general resilience. Some forms of insurance are general resilience. An umbrella policy is general resilience. So that's kind of how I was thinking when I drew this sketch.
Mm-hmm. And I love that. I love the idea, and there's just so much detail. Again, the sketches are simple on the surface. It's black Sharpie, white paper, but the detail and the thought and the meaning behind every line. I thought of everything that crisp box. You're right. If you try to shove everything into this nice, clean, crisp box, and your life is this one box, it's not always like that. Life is messy, and things happen, and the unexpected happen. And I just love just the detail that goes into the sketch. Well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much, Carl. This has been just an incredible experience talking to you and going through some of, our favorite sketches. And I know you have at least 101 in the book, if not more. We've been looking at your sketches and using them with our clients for years because they just do such a great job of taking something so complex and that can have so much behind it and simplifying it into a Sharpie on a white piece of paper. And I've always loved how much these sketches can be used to start really, really deep, meaningful conversations.
Well, thanks,
And for
Christian.
anyone
Thanks,
watching
Stephen.
who needs
Yeah.
a copy of the book, we're more than happy to get one
Mm.
for you. So keep that in mind. And just to finalize, Carl, you're one of the pillars of the financial world from my point of view, an educator, a communicator, a visionary.
Mm.
Thank you so much. I'm one of thousands of people that can say you changed how I think things, you change how I address things, and I'm better for it. So thank you so
Mm.
much, and we look forward to all that the future brings to us, and whatever your next creation is, I'm just looking forward to that. So
Mm.
thanks again.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks, Christian. It's clear you put a lot of thought into this, and I really appreciate it. That was really fun. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well,
Okay,
thank you again,
cheers.
everyone, for watching. Take care.